Um, Secondly, most pancreatic enzymes are highly processed. In the pancreas, the pancreatic proteolytic protein digesting enzymes, which are the main anti-cancer enzymes, are produced in a precursor inactive form, as you know, because if they weren't, they dissolve the pancreas, you'd end up with pancreatitis and die. So the pancreatic proteolytic enzymes are produced in an inactive precursor form. And it was thought by Levin that in their inactive precursor form, they will have no effect, they'll be useless in terms of a digestive aid or an industry. They use, for example, they use pancreatic enzymes. Nestle uses pancreatic enzymes to help process their chocolate. It makes it smoother. Leather tanners use pancreatic enzymes. They use trypsin to make the leather smoother. So there are a lot of industrial applications for pancreatic enzymes in addition to their use in medicine. And it was thought that you needed the active enzyme. So Levin developed this complicated method of activating all the precursors from like trypsinogen to trypsin, chymotrypsinogen to chymotrypsin. And he thought this was a great innovation, as did all the pharmaceutical companies. The problem is it's very unstable because pancreatic enzymes digest proteins, and enzymes are themselves proteins. So as they sit in a jar in a drugstore or a health food store, they start auto-digesting, and you often end up with a pile of amino acids. In the precursor form, they can last, 10,000 years. You bury them with the Egyptian mummies, and 10,000 years later, our enzymes would still be in their active form. They would still be.
All your enzymes are in the precursor form?
No, we found that for treatment of cancer or for use in humans, you want a certain percentage in the active form and a certain percentage in the inactive form. And that worked best. And we tried all different combinations and proportions. And, we're grateful to Procter & Gamble for giving us the money to do all this stuff because some of these tests were expensive. We found a certain percentage should be active, and that when you have most of it's inactive. And there's studies, a guy by the name of Nowak from, Hungary. They did studies. They learned about Beard's work totally independently of me, and they started testing pancreatic enzymes against cancer models in animals, and they found that the precursors are actually more active against cancer than the activated enzyme. One of Kelly's mistakes, you said to have we refined the program, he thought you want the enzymes to be more and more purified and more activated. And as I went through his records, I found that when he went to the more active preparations, the success rate actually started going down. That's one reason he ended up so frustrated. We couldn't get our book published, but also success in the mid-'80s wasn't what it was in the early '80s. And he went to a more and more processed product, more active. It was virtually all active, like a 10x pancreatin. They used this 1 to 10x system. But it wasn't really active at all. And it turns out Nowak has found that the precursor is actually more active against cancer specifically than the activated enzyme. He wrote a paper on that in the literature. So ours, we found that just serendipitously, independently, before Nowak had actually published. We just observed that in our own clinic, and I'd observed that as I went through Kelly's records. I went through his records year by year, beginning from about 1972, and I found the less processed the product he used, the better his success. And then as he got kind of hooked into using a more processed and more activated approach in the mid-'80s, the success rate went down. So you want pancreatic enzymes to have a certain percentage active, but most of them should be an inactive precursor, particularly if you're interested in cancer. At first, they last longer on the shelf. They're far more stable. But also the precursors seem to have the main anti-cancer effect, which is kind of a new finding. So and the Allergy Research Group, Nutricology, has enzymes done according to our specifications. But that would be my advice, is get an enzyme that isn't completely activated. More active isn't better in terms of pancreatic enzymes. Just like more and more D isn't better than the right dose of D. Mm-hmm. You want the right proportions of activated and inactivated.
Oh, excellent. Now, so those are the primary characteristics that distinguish yours from the others.
Yes, that it has a precise percentage of activated versus inactive. Most of it's in the inactive precursor.
Yes,
and the other thing with most of the processes that are used to make enzymes is the pancreas is a particularly fatty organ, and Ezra Levin 60 years ago believed that you have to get rid of all the fat. It's just inert. Of course, we now know that fat is not inert. It's very metabolically active, and it turns out that the pancreas fat has enzymes that work synergistically with the proteolytic component. Now, all of the enzymes that are made today are basically defatted, and they use these toxic alcohol solvents to get rid of the fat from the freeze-dried pancreas. And we leave a certain percentage of fat. We find it works best with about 25% fat,
wow.
75% proteinaceous material. So even in terms of the fat component, if you test a product like Viabin, for years was the standard pancreatic enzyme prescription form, it's like 1% fat. They literally defat it using alcoholic solvents. And we found that's not the way to go. We also found that if you leave a certain percentage of fat, it's more stable on the shelf, has a long shelf. We've tested enzymes we've had for 5 years in storage, and they're still as good and filled with both precursor and active enzymes as they were 5 years ago. They don't lose activity on the shelf, which has been a real problem even for prescription enzymes, that they lose activity very fast. The FDA's even looked in. I'm not a big fan of the FDA, but in terms of pancreatic enzymes, they're absolutely right. They came out with a position paper saying most prescription enzymes aren't really useful because they don't have any activity. The reason is, and not that the drug manufacturers are lying, is that as they sit on the shelf, they auto-digest and they lose activity. So that's because they're too pure and they're defatted. So you want fat, and you don't want them all in the activated form.
Well, it really sounds like you've put together a whole food enzyme is essentially what you've done. And there's really no other manufacturers that have taken this attention to detail as far as you're aware.
No, I mean, first, the conventional drug people all think we're crazy and don't care what happened, what we think. They just hope I get hit by a truck and stop bothering everybody with my ideas. The alternative people, likewise, have not really shown to. They're starting to. They're starting to get into what we're doing. And they're starting to ask questions, as you have, about our enzymes and what makes them different. Well, they're completely different from the things you'll normally get in the health food store and the drugstore. Now, keep in mind, again, that most of the enzymes, whatever the brand may be, there are only a few companies that actually make them. Just for years, Roche made all the B vitamins. Now, of course, the Chinese are making most of the B vitamins. But there are only a few companies that actually make pancreatic enzymes, and they all use that ESRA 11 patent. That was a brilliant patent in its day, but it's misguided in the fact he thought everything should be activated and it should be completely defatted. And we go the opposite way. Leave the fat.
Have you patented your process?
We kept it as a trademark because one of the problems with patenting, as you know, is when you
expose it to the world.
Everyone's there for the world to see. So they change. Some drug company will change one thing, and this way they don't really know. I mean, what I'm told you is kind of generic, but also I tend to think you have to share ideas. I'm not.
Sure.
I patented nothing that we do. I think sharing ideas is the way to get the knowledge, keep knowledge alive.
I agree. Now, people use these types of enzymes for other approaches other than treatment or prevention of cancer. One of them is inflammatory conditions like arthritis. So, would your enzymes also be useful in that condition?
Oh yeah, although we're known for treating cancer, we do treat a lot of autoimmune diseases and inflammatory diseases like lupus and scleroderma and multiple sclerosis and even chronic infections. And in Germany, I can't claim I'm the first person to do this. Even Kelly was doing this. In Germany, they use pancreatic enzymes to treat inflammatory conditions like arthritis. They find them very helpful. And they also use the plant-based enzymes like bromelain from pineapple. So we do use them in our programs for lupus and the autoimmune diseases and inflammatory diseases. Like I have a patient right now with terrible rheumatoid arthritis when he came to me. He'd been everywhere from the Mayo Clinic on down, conventional, alternative, nothing been able to help. 3 months on the program, his pain. He told me, I was speaking to him 2 days ago, about 80% gone, and the enzymes work. They help. We use other things, to help rebuild the joints, like collagen and glucosamine, the usual things. But we find the enzymes really help with inflammation, autoimmune diseases.
Yeah, we've also seen one of the new and upcoming nutrients in there is astaxanthin, is one of the type of carotenoids. Has phenomenal antioxidant.
Oh, very useful, yeah.
So, but I'm wondering, speaking with the enzymes, one of the popular ones in the alternative medicine community is Wobenzyme, that from Germany. And is that closer to the pharmaceutical types?
That's closer to the pharmaceutical. I knew Ramsberg, who's now dead, who's one of the founders of the Wobenzyme company, Wobenmugus, I guess it was known as. And he and I talked about this a number of times. One of the problems with Wobenzyme is they use the beef pancreas because they get it traditionally got it from Argentina. And it's cheap. It's cheaper than pig. But one of the problems is, the cows don't have a digestive system similar to ours. Cows, first, they're pure vegetarians, and they have that double stomach, and they rely on bacterial fermentation to digest their food. They have a very weak pancreas. Their pancreas is a very small component of enzymes. The last animal I would use as a source for enzymes is beef cattle. That's what Wobenzyme uses. The pigs are omnivores like us. They have a pancreas that is very similar to ours. For years, diabetologists would treat treat their diabetics with insulin from pig.
Right, before recombinant, yeah.
And because the amino acid homology, the amino acid sequencing of pig insulin was virtually identical to the human. Similarly, we find that the amino acid sequencing of the pig pancreatic enzymes is very similar, not identical, but very similar to our enzymes. So pig pancreas is the way to go. So Wobenzyme uses beef, which I think is, first, it's too weak, and it's not similar enough to the humans, though it can be used. And they use a purified product. They have some kind of freeze-dried pancreas in the product, but it's primarily processed by that ESRA 11 type process. And Ransberger told me, he's the guy who founded that company. He said he believed that the more activated, the better. And I said, I don't think so. I don't think that's the way I'm going to go.
Well, just from a holistic perspective, I mean, your product sounds like it's far superior, and it really has opened my mind and eyes to this whole process. So I really thank you for that.
Yeah, it really is. I had to become an enzyme chemist, which was not something I thought I'd initially be back when I was planning to spend my life at Sloan, because I found when I realized Isaacs and I, to save this therapy, we have to go off on our own and we have to find enzymes. And when I came back to New York, I actually lived in my mother's house in Queens before I set up my practice, because I was leaving research. I didn't have a lot of money, and I actually learned how to test enzymes. And in my mother's kitchen, I would test different pancreas products from different companies, and that's how I began to sort out what the problem was with. As Kelly got more into the more purified, more activated enzyme, the success rate went down, and I began to see that there were less processed products available, and they worked really well when we started our practice.
Terrific. So So you've given us two really important tools. One is to keep a clean diet, as clean of food as possible, and to use the enzymes, and then also coffee enemas. I would be the third. Enema. So what any other pearls?
Well, yeah, the three basic things: clean food, pancreatic enzymes, and the detoxification, which in this polluted environment is so important. Of course, whenever I lecture about diet, patients say, well, you say diet, clean diet, but you use different diets. Yes, I do. And then they immediately say, well, how can we tell what diet I should be on? Yeah, we have tests in our office. We look at blood work differently than other people, and we have sophisticated ways, quote unquote, of figuring out which specific diet a patient needs. But something that's really quite simple. Meat eaters love meat. They don't like salads. They don't want to eat fruit. They want to have a big piece of fatty meat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They dream about pot roast. Their idea of heaven is pot roast with baked potato, with sour cream on it. And that's exactly what they should eat. Vegetarians literally will gag at the thought of pot roast. They can't stand. What makes them feel sick? That's when they, if you give a cow a steak, it's not going to eat it. It'll starve to death before it eats a steak. If you give a salad to a lion, it will starve before it eats to a lion, it's grass. It's not going to eat grass. People tend to like the foods that they should eat. Yeah, everybody likes chocolate. No, we shouldn't eat chocolate. But we tend to like the foods that we should eat, and it's the experts that screw everything up by telling everybody you should be vegetarian. Or Atkins, whom I knew very well, and he was well-intentioned, he thought everyone should be a meat eater. It was wrong. Not everyone's going to do well on that diet. I knew people who went on Atkins and got very sick because they were genetic vegetarians, and I tried to tell Bob, who was a good friend, that they should start thinking more like Kelly, and he didn't, but that's okay. So you tend to like the food you should eat. So keep that in mind. I mean, yeah, no one should eat white flour, white sugar, junky stuff. It should be organic. If you're eating meat, it should be grass-fed. If you're eating fruits and veggies, they should be organic. But a typical vegetarian-type patient, a Kelly sympathetic dominant acid patient, they can eat a salad and a piece of fruit for lunch, and that's all they want, and they're good for 8 hours. They don't get hypoglycemic on that. If a meat eater ate like that, half an hour later they'd be collapsing from exhaustion because they had no energy. They need a piece of fat to keep them going. Yeah. So people tend to like the foods they eat. Forget about what experts say. If you like fatty meat, you're supposed to eat. If you can't stand it, you're not a meat eater.
So listen to your body.
You got to listen to your body. Yeah, body's smarter than any doctor, including me.
Do you find that people's type will change over time and shift? I mean, not dramatically, but maybe from a mixed type.
Kelly always made that a warning that to me and to the people he trained, that you had to be aware that people could change types. We see that happening, but usually it's gradations, like someone who starts extremely vegetarian might get more moderately vegetarian, eat a little more animal protein as their body gets more efficient. Extreme eater, but very often these are fixed, and it's genetically fixed. Someone who's genetically like an Eskimo is going to be genetically like an Eskimo the day they were born, the day they die. They're always going to need fatty red meat, and they're not going to do well with carbohydrates. And a genetic vegetarian, like a Polynesian, they're going to eat fruits and veggies and tubers every day, and that's what they need. There are shifts, but not dramatic shifts. We don't see a whole lot of dramatic shifting. In 23 years, I've never seen that.
Okay, well, that's an important observation. I mean, it really, some of the most powerful truths that we can discern are really from people who, like yourself, who've really dedicated their life to carefully examining these variables and then seeing what they come up with. So I really appreciate your opportunity to share that truth that you've uncovered with us. Are there any further pearls that you'd suggest, especially specifically with the priority as to how to not only treat but prevent cancer?
Yeah, there's so much information about exercise helping protect against not only heart disease but also cancer. Even conventional doctors are starting to recognize that. Now, having said that, I mean, I know a lot of us, like myself, we work so hard. It's hard to do formal exercise, but activity is important, even if